Salam and welcome to Mecca Collective. Today we're in conversation with Muslim entrepreneur Dr. Scott Fraser to explore his entrepreneurial journey. Dr. Scott Fraser is a formally trained biophysical chemist and founder of Fraser's Medical, which helps pre-med students essentially get into medical school, and has also been involved in a number of startups, including Heidi Health, which seeks to modernize the way medical professionals and institutions interact with their patients. Thank you so much, Scott, for joining us today.
Assalamualaikum. Thanks very much for having us, Naval.
Awesome. So to start off with, it would be great to get a little bit of an elevator pitch into what Fraser's Medical is. So could you give us a 10-second elevator pitch of what your business is?
The goal of Fraser's Medical is to help students reach their goals for their medical or medical health aligned career. And we also want to do that in a way that not only helps them pass tests or what have you, but also becomes a very conscious, socially and societally impactful individual in that career, so that we can better the medical community through exceptional candidates.
Awesome. And over the past few years, Fraser's has been growing quite exponentially, I would say. It started off, it seems, just with a handful of people, and now from the recent stats that I saw was, as of 2021, it was about 3,000 GAMSAT students that went through Fraser's. But of course, you not only do GAMSAT tuition, right? You do a number of other things as well. Could you maybe touch on those points?
Yeah. So the 3,000 students isn't just the GAMSAT students. It's all of the students that we have per annum, but it's still a big level of growth from I guess our humble beginnings. And then Fraser sort of started off as a bit of an alternative indie GAMSAT tutoring provider, and that was sort of what we were known for. We were known for our people and whatnot. We've done our best to stay true to that, but we also saw that there was a need to help students as they continued on that journey. So naturally, we evolved into helping students with their interview programs. And I think Dr. Tom Kelly was pretty instrumental in that. He was sort of one of our early tutors who also had a real passion for this. And we encouraged him to sort of help and develop that aspect of the business. Then we found out, we were just getting so many questions from people when the UMAT became the UCAT. Can you help us with that? And we then launched Fraser's UCAT to help with that. And then we realized that, we shouldn't be operating these businesses as silos. The student journey is a continuous journey. Sometimes it's linear, but sometimes it's tortuous. And yeah, Fraser's Medical is really the umbrella that sort of covers all of those different businesses and all of those different aspects of the journeys. And now we also consult for students to help them if they do want to sort of study overseas.
Oh wow!
Or they do want to pivot, and they maybe they've started down this pathway, but now they're looking at, maybe it's going into tech, maybe it's going into mechatronics and bionics. Either way, we just want to help people get into careers where they're happy and they feel that they can be the best that they can be.
Excellent. And initially, when you started off, how did it look like? So what was the initial motivation, and how did you get started with this business to begin with?
Yeah, very, very humble. So I'd always done tutoring, even when I was in high school, still studying myself, tutoring younger students. So it's something I really enjoyed, and I'd always kept it as my side hustle as I was going through my own formative studies. When I was in my honours year, I was also lecturing at Melbourne Uni and tutoring as well. And a few of the students who were sort of my students in the subjects for biomedical science and whatnot said that they were preparing for the GAMSAT and that they wanted some help. And yeah, helped them. They did well. Following year, they told some friends, so it kind of just grew. But after that, I found that my students, they weren't all getting in. So I kind of looked into it because they weren't preparing differently. I was preparing them as a group and preparing them all in relatively the same way. And I sat the test myself, found out that it really wasn't testing what students were asking me to prepare them for. So yeah, I developed the the first iteration of the bridging courses and whatnot that would become the bedrock of Fraser's. And then I started the process of I guess recruiting others to join Fraser's, because I saw that most of the people out there were people that sort of professed to be able to do everything themselves, and that didn't really sit well with me. Even though when I sat it, I scored very well, I knew that there were others that could teach the other sections better than I could, and teaching and doing aren't the same thing. So, I knew there were other inspirational individuals out there that I wanted to get on board, and I did, and that meant that we could inspire students across all of the different sections, and that's how Fraser's grew. So, we just sort of grew organically in Melbourne.
Mhm.
We then expanded to Perth. We had an ulterior motive to expand to Perth. One of the co-founders at that time was engaged to someone in Perth,
Right.
so
Okay.
it definitely helped
Okay.
to make the
Physical
the trip
presence.
every other
Mm.
weekend there. Yeah, yeah, and then I think around about that time it's when forums and whatnot started to get a bit more popular, and Tom had also joined, and he had a really big YouTube following,
Mm.
and we just got more requests to go to the other places, and before you knew it, we were standing up teams across the country and growing.
Awesome. That sounds fantastic. So, ever since those humble beginnings, I guess it's been success after success. And now that you've established this business, what were some of the hurdles on the way, and how did you overcome them to achieve what you've achieved today?
Yeah, I don't think it has been. I mean, probably outwardly, there's this sort of
That's always the
misconception, I
case,
think, that
right?
everything's success after success. And before we started, we were talking about old mate Gouldy.
Yeah.
So Gouldy was one of the first people that I ran the idea past, that I think I could do something here.
Yeah. And just for our
And
viewers,
Fraser,
this is Peter Gould, who's the founder of Gould
yeah,
Studio up in Sydney, and he's been a fantastic resource for Mecca Collective and the entire community. And yeah, definitely shout out to him. But yeah, go on,
yeah,
Scott.
mashallah, Gouldy's Gouldy's really good, and us convert bogans, we are allowed to call each other that. Um, so I ran it past him, and my initial vision of Fraser's was as an app. So I was pitching him an app for GAMSAT, for this is before Metafy, so for UCAT, for all this sort of stuff. And I actually then Gouldy said, maybe I should launch a marketing course. So he has his marketing course each year, but interestingly, the very first sort of test run of that, I was one of the handful of students that was in that class learning about the basics of marketing, and I guess also brand development, and also from the Islamic
Mm.
perspective of how we should sort of remain conscious in that process. Um, and despite all of my great intentions that no, we should go with tech, blah blah blah. At the end of the day, people people wanted tutoring, and it sounds sort of egotistical to say, but people wanted to learn from me, and
Right.
at the time as well, a couple of the other tutors that we had. So we at the end of the day, we had to give people what they want, and Fraser's sort of grew that way. Um, and I think the other thing that was sort of a really big um, changer was one of the other co-founders, Waleed. Like, I also reached a nexus point where I realized this was sort of beyond my scope and my skill set. I was an academic. I was a tutor and a teacher, and at that time, I was also working in corporate science. So, like, I knew a bit about business management, but I wasn't formally trained or anything like that.
Okay.
Um, and all of the advice I was getting was, whatever you do, don't take on co-founders, don't dilute your equity in a business. And I don't know, my gut just kept telling me that the only way you really achieve things is through collaboration. And so, him, Tom, Nosh at the time, and Andy Sam at the time. There was a bunch of us that were all involved at various different points. Um, I think the honest reality is Frasers wouldn't be as successful in inverted commas today if it wasn't for all of the people that contributed and ensured that we didn't have some sort of a closed-minded groupthink. Instead, it was quite the opposite. We had really robust discussions, different angles, different viewpoints, and different skill sets. So, yeah, for me, it's never been about like-minded people getting together. It's actually been about trusted people getting together that are aligned towards the same goal, but aren't necessarily going to just agree for the sake of it. So, I think Fraser's has really benefited from all of those different voices, and now it's just the way I work. I don't do things alone. I always do things together in partnership, in collaboration, because I think that's where the best outcomes lie.
Oh, that's some great advice for any founders, I guess. Being able to bounce off ideas and getting that mirror essentially to
Yeah,
look at yourself in another way is absolutely essential, and especially in the early stages, because sometimes in that entrepreneurial journey, and one of our previous guests mentioned that, Kelly Bennett, and she said the entrepreneurial journey is a lonely one, and not everybody will understand you because you might have these visions in your head that other people might think, well, there's so many other tutoring places out there. Why do you want to start a tutoring place? And to find some people that
yeah,
are motivated with the same aim is invaluable in terms of the feedback they can get. And I guess on that point, were there any mentors or people that guided you along the way that you thought they've given you some excellent advice or maybe bad advice that you would like to share?
yeah. I think I've had a few really good mentors, like whether it's formally or
Mm.
informally. Um, I've always been able to go back to my PhD supervisor, Tash Polizos at Melbourne Uni. It's once in a blue moon, but he knows if I email and I want to just bounce an idea, he always gives me really good, really raw feedback.
Mm.
Um, a student at one point who
Wow.
I didn't realize who this person was, but he was teaching at the AGSM, or is it ASGM? I don't know, the business school up at UNSW, and he was going to do a career change into medicine, and I didn't realize he was this guy that taught entrepreneurialism at UNSW. Um, but yeah, when he actually decided to not go down that path, we just caught up and had a coffee, and he gave me a lot of tips, and I didn't realize who he was. But then since then, he's now in medtech, and he's got a great startup, Drop Bio Health, that Phil Hayes and Kelp at Sinclair. And yeah, he's always just had this philosophy of like, how can I help? And he'll give you 15 minutes of his time, and he makes it count. And it's been something that then I've adopted, like with my staff and just with other people. So I'm quite happy to donate my time, and just ask that question. So that was really transformative. Um, Waleed was always great as a co-founder, because he was as your other guest said, like being a founder and being a CEO particularly is really, really lonely.
Mm.
You've kind of got to take on everyone else's problems, and be there for them, but no one's there for you.
Yeah.
And it can be really bad for your mental health too. Whereas if it wasn't for Waleed, I probably wouldn't have been able to make it through. He
Wow.
was incredible, and Tom was too, to a very large extent. But Waleed has a really high EQ for knowing when to check in and just make sure that I'm going to be able to sort of make it through.
Right.
Um, for bad advice, as terrible as it sounds, like it was usually just friends and family, and I think it's a pretty universal thing, because they've got this bias
Yeah.
around you because they care for you, that they want you to have the biggest slice of the pie, and they want you to be the one that is the only successful one in the end, and they don't want anything to jeopardize that. But they're really not looking at it objectively, and they're really not looking at it in long form.
Mm.
And yeah, to be honest, and I think my wife would happily agree with this, like I have a stubborn streak to me, and they've been great motivators, my family, because whenever they said, "I don't," or "You can't," that's exactly when I'll double down and be like, "Yeah, well, I will."
Yes.
So I'm backing myself. Appreciate the advice, but I'm gonna zig while you guys think I should
Oh, I
zag,
love that.
and it's always worked. So yeah, I think that's actually something that a lot of founders, I think, particularly, you know, being a white convert that converted very late in the journey. The Western culture doesn't have that reverence for family, like what sort of Islam requests us to do. And I think that's a really tough thing for young Muslim entrepreneurs. Is they're getting this advice and they want to be good sons and they want to be good daughters, and it's not always the best advice. In fact, a lot of times it's very outdated advice. It's advice that doesn't have insight into the modern entrepreneurial space or the
Absolutely.
tech space or the startup space or whatever. And it's a tough sort of road to navigate when you're trying to be, a good Muslim son or daughter, and at the same time, you're also trying to shoot for the moon like you need to if you want to be a successful entrepreneur. So yeah, that's a tough one to navigate. And
Absolutely. Sometimes bridging
yeah,
those ideas with family or friends that you know personally, and they know you from a very, very I would say vulnerable level. They might have some expectations of you that might not be true, or they don't know the other side of your character. For example, if you're a person who is particularly interested in one field, and as you said, your parents or your close relatives, they're not really in touch with this new emerging area. For example, the a
yeah,
recent one would be crypto or blockchain or the metaverse, and they would think, well, what is this waste of time? But if we track back and we look at the same time as the internet emerged, we would probably get the same reactions. But obviously, the internet is something that we cannot
correct.
live without. So it's of course always good to go back to the people you love and the people you trust to get their advice, but it's always probably a good reminder from you, Scott, to back yourself and remember what to take and what not to take on board.
Yeah, particularly when you're at the scale where you've got employees.
Hmm.
You know, you have a, whether you want to call it a fiduciary duty or a social
Hmm.
duty. Those people rely on your business's um, success for
Hmm.
income. You you also have a duty of responsibility to them. So yeah, I think you just have to find a balance between sort of listening, and at least listening. Taking that info in, but yeah, you've still got to back yourself, and you've still got to follow your North Star and stick with it. Yes, of course, it's good advice, but yeah, it's a tough one.
It is. It
Yeah, I
is.
think it'll always be tough as long as time exists.
100%. Um, you mentioned that one of your co-founders was there for you, in a time of need where you tried to figure things out. Would you want to share anything about that? What were, the particular challenges that you're facing at the time with the business or running the business?
Yeah, I think it's not a case of one specific time.
Mhm.
It's more a case of um, you know as the business evolved, as my role evolved. I mean, Fraser's for a long time was just something that I did on the side of my day job. In 2018 was when I quit my day job and decided to go full time in Fraser's and really, you know, go all in on on what we were doing. And yeah, I mean, when you're innovating, when you're trying to be dynamic and do new things, there's risk associated with that. There's challenges that you don't foresee, and you need people there that you have that understanding of that, like they can see what you're going through because they are involved with the business. But I think have the awareness that you're there's also a human element to it as well, particularly in our business, in education and in health. We're dealing with people, and we are driven by care. Um, and it's primarily because we care that it affects us. You know, it. if it was banking and finance, maybe it would be different. But I'm sure there are banking and finance people who are also doing things, with their heart on their sleeve because they care. So
Mhm.
it was fortunate that I had a co-founder that was aware of that. Um, and it's good to see, like, nowadays there's a lot of, I know they practice this at Oscar and Heidi, the founders get together and kind of have these sessions where they kind of just get everything off their chest, and um, it takes care of the mental health and makes sure that the relationship between the founders is always good, uh, or at least always understood. And yeah, you really, really need to do that because being a founder, especially the more successful you get, you actually are becoming more and more isolated. So
Mm.
really, really important role that I think Willie didn't. He wasn't asked to do it. He just, he had the wisdom and the insight and the foresight to know to do it.
Wow, that's very, very interesting. Um, on that, you just mentioned that there was a time at which you were in your, I guess, in your full time role, you're working, you were engaged in Fraser's GAMSAT on a part time basis, as a side gig, I guess. And what was that moment that really sparked that idea of I'm just going to quit my job now and go hard on this? What was that point where you decided that?
Ooh, I'd been thinking of it for a long while. Like, I wasn't happy in my job. Um, for a number of reasons. Like, I liked the company I worked for, but I hit sort of I think you'd call it a professional plateau. There was a degree of politics and things out of my control that were stopping my progression
Mm.
within that organization. I I saw some other opportunities in sort of commercial science again, but I don't know. I also saw similar politics and similar issues, and at the same time, I was finding helping students reach their goals very
Mhm.
rewarding. And he was one of the things that got me out of bed in the morning, and I found it incredibly hard to get out of bed in the morning for my other job. Uh, so yeah, I had a pretty horrific um, personal moment where I lost both of my grandparents,
Oh wow.
and I kind of took I just took leave from my job. I didn't consult my bosses. I just said I'm going on leave. I'll be back when I'm back,
Okay.
and that was almost like me testing whether they valued me.
Right.
They let me have the leave, but I came back and I remember telling my wife, I said, "There's a really good chance I'm going to resign today." And I think everyone has those concerns around stable jobs and all of that. But by this time, I knew that there was no such thing as a stable job. And yeah, she was more supportive at that point in time of making that leap. And I went in, had a chat with my boss, and told him that I wanted a bit more balance in my job because I traveled sort of, let's say, 5 weeks out of 6, and it takes a toll on you. He just basically said, there's a contract and you'll do what you need to do. And I don't know, I just felt inspired and said, well, in that case, I think we should rip up that contract. And
Wow.
you know we left it there. And yeah, I set my date as like a couple of days later because I'd already taken most of my leave. And yeah, it's funny, they had a kickoff the day after I left, and they invited me back for the kickoff, and I actually said no. Like, and that was something I really looked forward to in my old job. Is I
Mhm.
loved the kickoff. I loved the camaraderie. And it's like, no, I've got the next chapter to go and do.
Wow.
And yeah, Waleed and I just had a whole day of just planning the future of Fraser's, and that was awesome.
Wow.
We It was the first step of the next big step. Um, didn't tell all my family that I'd done that. I think everyone
Probably
thought I was
for the
still working
better.
at my old job. Yeah, yeah, for a couple of months. It was really only my wife that knew.
Wow.
And but yeah, I should have made that leap sooner because I,
Wow.
I was very depressed and sad in that job. And yeah, people just, I don't know, they think doing your own thing is fraught with danger, and that
Mhm.
full-time jobs are safe and all of that. Uh, you've got to be able to get up in the morning, um, and I still want to get up for Frasers. I still love
That's amazing.
um, getting up and helping people and doing what I can and staying up late and doing the same thing as well.
Wow, that sounds very inspirational, Scott. Like some of the scenes that you described there, I was envisioning them in my head, and you could make a movie scene out of that itself. Like, why don't we rip up the contract itself? Like,
Yeah, I don't. I think I was a little more nice about it, but I think that's
that's
kind of what
yeah,
I effectively wanted to say.
yeah,
But yeah, it is what it
yeah,
is.
wonderful. And I think a lot of people would resonate with that message itself. And the energy that goes into a startup is sometimes way more than it goes into your formal full-time job. But the effect at the end when you see the results, and I can only imagine how refreshing that feels, and how much more elevated you feel
Mm,
as a person, and um, kind of enjoying those wins itself. So I can imagine that's one of the
yeah,
drives of why you're still here today.
absolutely,
Mm,
absolutely.
awesome.
Big factor. It's a different weight on your shoulders. I think when you're working in the grind full time, the weight is more around, you know, paying the bills, your responsibility to your family, all of that sort of
Yeah.
stuff, which isn't always super motivating. Whereas this weight, yeah, there's a lot of responsibility, there's a lot of pressure, but it's exciting and
Hmm.
it's positive. So you know, there's good stress and there's bad stress. I think
Hmm.
this is the good stress that you like.
Awesome. All right. I guess now, having spoken about some of the experiences you had in your journey, entrepreneurial journey itself, um, let's talk a little bit about setting up the business itself. So, in the initial stages, or at those key junctures where you were ready to expand and innovate what you were doing, how did you raise funding for for your venture, and how did you actually set those strategic plans?
Yeah, uh, we've never raised funding.
Wow.
So Frasers is a completely bootstrapped business, um, and it's built off the back of, I think, a lot of social equity, and that's not just me. That's the other co-founders. Even a lot of our tutors as well will, they're really passionate about what they do and helping people. They'll pull the extra hours. They'll do the extra things that we need to do. But particularly in the early days, it was just literally, not paying ourselves. We knew where it could. In fact, we didn't even know. Like we had a feeling of where it could go, and we were kind of riding a vibe to try and get there. And we all enjoyed each other's company on that journey. Uh, we enjoyed helping the people and them, you know, making us feel like we made a difference. So yeah, we just pushed on. I'd say strategically, we did very minimal analysis in the early days about unlocking opportunities and whatnot. It was more just like follow your gut, make it work. And I think that's one of the good things when you're starting off very early in business. You have that ability to just invest your time as the main resource and give it a shot to make it work. That's I think how a lot of startups eventually start. So now it's more a case of we've got a big staff, we've got locations and whatnot. Yeah, we do need to plan and we do need to think very wisely because we we only have a very very limited budget on what we can use to innovate and to launch new things and to get new ideas off the ground. We're also fortunate enough now though that you're having that bigger staff and having a lot of people that are, I think, similarly inspired and at early stages of their journey within Frasers. They come to us now with ideas like, why don't we do this, why don't we do that, and that's great. It fast tracks the innovation process. They're often then willing as well to sort of invest some of their own time, uh, and we usually reward that in the other direction as well, and um, you know make the Frasers family a bigger family.
Fantastic. And in terms of that innovation journey, you're also involved with another startup, which is Oscar and including Heidi Health.
Yeah.
How was that journey and getting into those spheres? I guess so. For our viewers, could you explain what Oscar and Heidi Health are, and then tell us a little bit about your journey within them?
Yeah. So I mean, Oscar is where it started, and it's the brainchild of Tom and one of our other tutors from back in the day, Clarence. And they wanted to come up with an AI, um, natural language processing sort of bot that could help students train to take histories better, because they were very passionate about the issue of incorrect diagnosis and
Mhm.
misdiagnosis. So they looked at it from the education perspective and said, well, we can build this amazing training tool where, because a lot of students or medical students, when they're in the hospital, they're often just watching on. They're not
Yeah.
actually actively engaged in the process of developing their clinical skills. You can still do that. And of course, there's a lot of benefit there to be had, learning off people that are much more experienced and have some wisdom to offer. But practicing it with friends, practicing it with your loved ones doesn't sort of mimic that scenario as well. So that's where Oscar came out of. And yeah, when Tom came to us with that idea and that he really wanted to pursue it, I think it's fair to say that we incubated it through the first phase, and we funded it to get it to a level where it just became increasingly apparent that there was a really awesome blue sky for Oscar, but we also needed to be fair and reasonable to Tom and to the ambitions of Oscar, that probably was above and beyond the scope of the blue sky of Fraser's. So it was spun out, and it was funded through venture capital, which was led by Blackbird and
Right.
a couple of other angel investors and what have you, and that was done just over 12 months ago. It
Right.
took a while to actually spin out. That was a whole learning experience for all of us. But yeah, that spun out, and what's just been amazing to watch, of course, is really watch Tom go from, he was a leader here at Fraser's, and very much someone that people look to for leadership. But now he's a CEO, and now he's really like blossomed. Um, Waleed's in his element, strategically there at the interface of tech and strategy, and uh, yeah, it's just it's all of his skills being tested and coming to the fore. So it's really bringing out the best in him. And yeah, now they've pivoted. It's a really tough time for startups and for tech
Mhm.
right now. And
It is.
I think Heidi was probably a few years away at the start, and it's probably also called Oscar. But yeah, Heidi's been brought forward, and Heidi actually can, not only assist doctors by being a conduit and something that assists them in ensuring that diagnosis is accurate by listening in the background and giving its diagnosis to make sure that the doctor doesn't stuff up. But it's now also solving a lot of the issues that we're facing with the GP crisis, that um, it's not profitable for GPs to operate on bulk billing anymore. So Heidi also takes a lot of the different incentive schemes and initiatives and different ways that you can engage a patient. So, sometimes we just need a prescription. Well, you can go onto your Heidi app, and Heidi will connect you to the appropriate telehealth,
Wow.
and do that. The doctors still get
Yeah.
paid, but it also means that the GPs can, rather than being limited to 15 minutes with
Mhm.
patient, they can now do like a really thorough, um, you know, consult with their patients, which I think if you talk to GPs, that's what they want to do. That's why they're passionate about being a GP. They
Absolutely.
they want to get to know their patients and really help them. But the current structure that Medicare has set up does not incentivize that.
Mm.
It incentivizes the least amount of time possible.
Absolutely.
So Heidi's like the happy medium where it allows doctors to not waste time on things that shouldn't require a lot of time. At the same time, they can spend time where they should spend time. Plus, it taps into all of the great AI and natural language processing that Oscar came up with, so that you're also contributing to ensuring that diagnoses are not missed, and that patients are very well cared for.
I guess you can see your journey at Fraser's Medical overall, and I guess Waleed's and Tom's itself as well, in nurturing them to become those kind of leaders, I guess, and opening those pathways. And it's pretty amazing to see that you guys went from leading a tuition platform for students, going on to build something that is going to hopefully impact the medical profession overall and how it interacts with its patients. That's pretty impressive. And I'm going to be watching this space because I think that's not just the only idea that is in your mind, and I think there's more to come.
Yeah, we do have a few other things that we're working on, and I think that's as well where we're different to other just standard tutoring companies, is that that's all they want to do. My wife always used to say to me, aren't the lecture slides done? Aren't you done? It's like, no, we'll. I think now I can openly say, like, we will never be done. We will never rest. There's always something we can do better. There's always other things you can do. But the lesson from Oscar and Heidi is really, there's that sort of famous quote. I think it's Richard Branson that a good leader makes other leaders. Um, and the thing that it's tough to do is, like, you need to let those birds leave the nest. So if you really have made good leaders and great great other little businesses in of their own right, you've got to help them to be all they can be. And that was very much a tough situation for me to be in at the first time. Was do you say no, all of this has to stay in house? We incubated this, blah blah blah. And again, a lot of the bad advice was, you own this, you fund this. But no, actually, if it's to realize its potential, you need to let it go. And yes, you still have a percentage, but this is now something that the VC people, they'll help it reach its heights. And you also need to give those leaders in their own right their opportunity to do that. So hopefully, I mean, it was a big learning experience, but hopefully it's not the last. And we want people to know that if you've got, we tell our students, our tutors, if you've got ideas, Fraser is actually the place to incubate them.
I love that.
You
should make a new
incubate it at
Fraser's incubator as part of that whole.
Funny you should mention that.
Okay.
So watch this
Right.
space. Watch this space. It's coming.
I
It's
love
coming.
that. I love that.
Yeah. But we don't want people losing their ideas to universities just to win some $10,000 check. If you have a great idea, real incubators will want nothing. They'll just want the opportunity to help you get to where you want to go, and maybe you cut them in a little bit. Maybe you don't. Maybe it was just a great networking experience of people that could get you to that next level. So, yeah, we see ourselves as being able to play a critical role there, because the med tech space is being held up and slowed down by big institutions, and hopefully there'll be other organizations as well that will take the lead from Fraser's in going to that helping those people reach all of their potential that they can reach.
Thank you so much, Scott. It's been absolute pleasure speaking with you. And I wish we could go on for longer than this, but for the sake of time, and as a sort of parting advice for our listeners and viewers, I guess, what is the one thing that you wish you knew before you started your business journey, and one thing that you would pass on to every founder, and as a last question?
Yeah, it's not really one thing, but it's more like a combination of two things. Is trust your gut. Your gut will always lead you in the right direction. At the same time, be open to making mistakes, learning from them, and pivoting to where the truth is. Don't say, oh well, my gut is always right in totality. There's no element of wrong. No, your gut's leading you, and hopefully you're guided by all the right intentions and principles and whatnot. But you could still be slightly wrong, and so yeah, trust your gut, and at the same time, be willing to embrace mistakes as learnings, and use them as something to continue forward.
The best piece of business advice are also applicable to life. And I guess even
Yeah,
in life decisions, even when you're going through your journey, that not only involves business, but your family, your studies, your career, I guess you should definitely trust your gut. And that's one excellent piece of advice. But an even better piece of advice is learn from your mistakes and be willing to pivot. I think that's really, really helpful, because sometimes the really courageous thing is admitting to it and taking ownership of it and making a change. And I think that's where the biggest growth is in terms of character generally. Well,
yeah,
Scott, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, and would love to have you back on board to discuss any other future projects that you have going, including what you've mentioned here as an exclusive Maker Collective interview,
yeah.
potential
You got an
incubator.
exclusive. There you go.
There you go.
Yeah.
But thank you so much, and I really, really appreciate your time that you've invested today.
No, absolute pleasure, Navan. Thank you so much for having me, and yeah, to make a collective for giving me the opportunity to chat with you.
Awesome. And thank you all for tuning in today to learn more about Dr. Scott Fraser's journey with Fraser's Medical and Oscar/Heidi Health as well. And if you'd like to stay up to date with the happenings at Maker Collective and support this initiative, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us across our social media accounts. And until next time, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Take care.
Finally.